Welcome. I'm Debra and Clement, and today I am speaking with Alexander Creek. He's an astrologer, a numerologist, a psychic medium, and he's been working professionally with spirituality clients since 2015. So there's quite a bit of experience under his belt. And so, Alex, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you, Deborah. This is I've been super excited. I think our Gemini synastry is gonna have some fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. And today we want to talk about, well, a topic that I think is near and dear to your heart, money and career.
hmm
And so, and I think it's just timely, especially the money
Yeah.
part, right? Given, today the pain at the pump and
Mhm.
all those types of things. And so are you seeing any type of I would say a trend, but any interest in particular with money in terms of clients or just, people chatting you up and saying, Alex, what do you see?
I mean, it's probably my Taurus sun. That's why I've always just been like I'm always, of course, interested in the spirituality part, but like and also my Virgo moon, like the practical application of those topics is kind of partially what drives me as well. Like I'm like, I can get down with like super wooey stuff, but like at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, let's look at your transits. And I'm like, how's your money this year? Like, how are your relationships? Like the really practical things. As far as like the trends that I'm seeing, like, I'm not sure it's exactly with my clients that they're asking about. Like, I'm not really feeling the money insecurity with my clients just yet. But definitely, I feel like every time I open like TikTok or something, there's always like some video that's like the economy is gonna collapse or like the recession's coming and how to prepare. And I'm definitely like myself, I'm like, okay, let's not join like the fear panic brigade. But I feel like looking at just you and I like looking at these eclipses this year in Taurus, Venus rules, that's very much like a money sign next to Uranus, this planet of like instability and like disruption. So definitely looking at that at least in general, but I haven't seen it with my clients too much yet. So
And speaking of the Taurus, just to say, right,
mhm.
we talk about the Taurus, yes, the Venus rule, the money, the Uranus, crypto, a little bit of a crypto
Yes.
collapse there, right, as
Yeah.
well going on. Because
Yep.
usually, yeah, we do see it in the greater, and also the Scorpio, because that's money as well. It's different type of money, right?
Mhm.
And I just think that's so interesting because Taurus money, or I say Taurus money, excuse me, Scorpio money, eighth house money,
Mhm.
that's money that comes, sometimes we're paid directly. And there's a lot of, call them, right, gig workers, and just a lot of, whether it's DoorDash or people just, working. And we've seen that on the uptick as well.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And you know what? You mentioned TikTok. And so I was a little
Mhm.
remiss, and I'm just going to say now, Alex, let me just mention your website, and that
Sure.
is dogstaroracle.com.
Mhm.
And you can find Alex on TikTok. He's got a great TikTok. Okay, I follow Alex, so watch him on TikTok. And I do at Dog Star Oracle, Instagram also Dog Star Oracle, but YouTube is Alexander Creek, and that's AlexanderKriech.
Yes.
And you do have a podcast, and we'll get to that in a
Mhm.
moment,
Sure.
but just sort of digress there a moment, but just to come back just to, I'm going to say, to the money, to the finances, because you are 100% right. You brought up that whole fear factor that's
Mhm.
going on out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know why I'm just always drawn to looking at money and career in a chart. Like I'm always looking at these deeper things, but again, like you said, it's probably my Taurus sun that I'm just like, let's look at your 10th house of career. Let's look at the eighth house of like shared resources. I'm just, for some reason, my eye always goes there first. That and the second house of like earned income and possessions. So
Well, I think it's common. I mean, all of us as astrologers, when we look at
mhm,
a chart, there's
mhm,
just something that our eyes go to first, right? It's
mhm.
just something that we're drawn to. And I look at a chart, and the first thing I'm looking at is that chart ruler. Where is it? What's it doing? What are
Absolutely.
the aspects? And that tells me, I'm feeling like, okay, I'm getting this right. Read
Yeah.
on, read on the person. And
Yeah.
from there, yeah, where do we go? And so
Mhm,
for you, it happens to be money. But the point is, that's also probably what makes you so good, quite frankly, right?
mhm.
At working, with money, whether you're looking at trends or you are, clients do come today, especially, work is changing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, and
work.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's especially, you know, I noticed like on, you know, with TikTok or Instagram, like these sort of short videos, the law of attraction and like manifesting has arguably never been more popular. However, I mean, I kind of feel like it's misunderstood a little bit. And it's like you can manifest anything you want, and it's very like instant gratification. But if I have like a client come to me and they're really having a lot of questions about career, you know, and like how can they, you know, like what is going to be most aligned with them, but also how are they going to make money? Right. I'm like, you
Yeah.
really like, I don't think that you can manifest anything you want, because I think that you kind of come in with some kind of basic soul agreement of like, you know, some certain lessons and some certain things that you're going to do in this lifetime. And I feel like the chart can really give you a good, really some really pretty solid breadcrumbs and like, okay, your chart's kind of saying you got some Gemini placements going on here. This maybe means like multiple streams of income or doing maybe a few different things, you know. So I don't know where I was going with that.
No, you're going
But
exactly what
yeah.
I'm just going to make a note on law,
Yeah.
the manifestation, because I'm a
Mhm,
big believer in it. But
mhm,
I always say, yes, absolutely it works. And I think there should be little fine print that says like, what is it? Limitations and exclusions apply.
mhm.
And it's, you know, only in the sense that it is put out there for years. It's kind of like, it's, you said instant gratification, right? It's like,
Mhm,
boom, you just do it, you think it happens. And the point is, there is that whole thing, I believe, with manifesting and the energy and being able to receive, right? And being able
mhm.
to attract. But at the end of the day, when we're looking at the horoscope, ideally, it's great to look and say, oh, teacher, you know, accountant, astrologer.
Right.
It doesn't always work that way.
Mhm,
It's really, I find a lot of times it's more about, we see the talents, we see skills sometimes, right?
yes.
Certain skill sets that can really be applied to different, right? To different careers.
Mhm,
And yeah. And as far as what we came in for our lessons, yeah, I think some of us, especially those maybe who are born with the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio, right,
mhm.
money signs, they've come here to learn about resources, handling resources.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's just some charts, it's so much more clear that there's so much more intense lessons around money, security, all these types of things. And, you know, like there's some people just in life where they just kind of have an easy time and it's not so much a big focus. And it will often like, oh, that there's, you know, like there's your benefics or something like
Yeah.
Venus and Jupiter are showing up in your eighth house and it just kind of flows or something like that, right? It's not going to be as intense for some people. So, or they or you can look, let's say like, oh, like their part, they just ended up with a partner that's like very wealthy,
Yeah.
like for instance. And again, those eighth house planets or those eighth house placements can kind of show that as well. So it just depends on the person.
No, it doesn't depend on the chart, because I actually had a client who had, you know, multiple partners,
Mhm.
would have relationships, always wealthy partners. It was just, and it showed in the chart, and
Totally.
right. And they came in here, but some of us, that's always say, it comes about the lessons that we've come to learn.
Mhm.
And we get so many opportunities, I always say, to get it wrong before we get it right, and how
Oh,
much we
absolutely.
struggle with
Yeah.
it. But at the same time, when you see that in a chart, or a client comes to you, right, and they're
Mhm.
like, it's the money issue, and that usually will sort of jump out when it's a problem. The answer, so to speak, or at least guidance, let's put it that way, there
Yeah.
is guidance in the chart of maybe
Mhm.
where they're stuck or what they have to overcome. And,
Mhm.
but ultimately it always comes down to free will. And I think that's the most important thing, is that there's all this
Mhm.
information in the chart. It's, the soul has all of these intentions.
Mhm.
And then here it comes in this human body. And very often we're kind of like, oh, that's too hard. Or,
Yes. Yes. Well, and you know, sometimes like you can see a few different potentials. You know, like I could see this happening. I could also see this happening. Just sometimes it depends on the astrological weather. Especially like during eclipse season or something, when like you can see the trend, but sometimes maybe how it manifests can be a little unpredictable, just because eclipses are by nature just disruptive and unpredictable influences, right?
Eclipses are tough. I mean, even
Yeah.
after all these years, I
Yeah.
still find eclipses tough to predict with,
Hmm.
because you have your eye on one thing and sometimes it's something else. Blind sides, absolutely. To me, it's a
Hmm.
very Uranus type of energy, quite
Absolutely.
frankly, right? Connected
Yeah.
to those eclipses. And the other thing, and I just think it's important, if you look at the chart and you can see different possibilities.
Hmm.
And So, and I do think this has to do a bit with age, because when you have someone else, say under 30, or maybe didn't have their Saturn return yet anyway, and there's
Mhm.
these possibilities, talk to that same person, when they're about 40 or 45,
Right.
and they may have done a few of those things, because
Yes.
we have these different potentials. And, I mean, I've had a few different careers. That's why. So I can speak from experience.
Yep.
Very often we sort of do end up expressing it all,
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
at the same time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember I was doing a reading for like a 19-year-old, like after her, because her mom, I did a reading for mom, and then she's like, "Oh, you're reading for my daughter," and I'm, doing this daughter's birth chart, and I'm like speaking to some things that I just clearly know she has not. That part of the chart has not quite manifested yet. And again, it's like, talk to me in your 30s, talk to me in your 40s. This will make sense. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying to you right now, like, she was just like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I know this will hit in about 15 years. Just give it some time.
No, but that's why I used to say, I had certain clients, I'll say, think of me when you're 40, think
Exactly.
of me when you're 40. But it just
Exactly.
has, because we do, and I think it's an important thing, we grow into our chart. We really
Hmm.
do, right? Because we're
Hmm.
seeing that entire lifetime, and
Hmm.
this lifetime of possibility and potential. And the other thing, and especially I'm going to just go back to money as well as
Hmm.
career
Yep.
choices, is, wherever we are in life, whether we like to admit this or not. And this was a tough thing for me to swallow, to be honest. It was for me to get on board with. But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, until I finally got it, I'm where I am because of all those decisions that I made, or
Hmm.
decisions that, at the time I could say, well, I didn't have control, or I was for, no, really, I just didn't make them, or it was easier at the time.
Right.
And so that's why, even with the energies, because you're talking about the transits and the
Hmm.
influences that are coming up, and
Hmm.
they could be great, but if you do nothing with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's, I mean, like a really nice trine or sextile or something comes around, and it's like a really nice energy, but there's kind of keywords like opportunity, and like you have to take advantage of it. So
Yeah,
sometimes, it's like, oh, that was a nice year, but I never actually did anything with that energy. So
because
yeah.
without a
Mhm.
conjunction, without even an opposition,
Mhm.
we don't get off the couch. It's such a feel good energy, those trines. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes it does. I will tell you, sometimes it does sort of like drop that gift, so to speak, in your lap.
Totally. Yep.
It can happen. It can definitely happen. But it's usually there's some type of a trigger, even if it's Mars, quite frankly, it could be
Mhm.
right Mars is,
Mhm.
but otherwise we feel good. And when we feel good, the truth is we're not that motivated. It's like, it's good. It's good.
Totally. Yeah, I happen to be born with my, depending on which way you look at it, because I have
Right.
Scorpio rising.
Mhm.
So if you look at the traditional ruler Mars, my Mars is opposing Saturn. So like sometimes I just feel, I'm like, okay, I really have to try extra hard over and over and over again to kind of get the results, basically. And early in life, it wasn't exactly easy going. You know what I mean? Just but it's just taught me a lot of like consistent effort. I feel like so.
Yes. Endurance.
Hmm. Hmm.
Endurance. And I'm not playing can you top this, I promise. But I have a Mars Saturn conjunction.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I feel your pain, but the
Yep.
opposition, but I will say, in some ways, with the opposition, at times I do think it's a little bit more difficult in some ways,
Hmm.
because there is that polarity, which certainly when
Hmm.
it's balanced, in terms of the signs, they can work very well. But
Hmm.
otherwise, we tend to be like, oh, I'm a little bit more on this side. Now I'm a little
Yep.
bit more on that side. At least with the conjunction, it's kind of like both planets, the same sign, kind of on the same team.
Hmm. Absolutely. I can see that.
Yeah, but it did motivate. But the point is, it did motivate you,
It
right?
did. Well, and it's probably helpful that I have Saturn and Capricorn too.
Yeah, that's very
So
nice. That's
yeah,
very nice.
yeah. It's like we're gonna get it done. It might be late, essentially, but the homework will be getting done, essentially. So
Yeah, no, it will. And
yeah,
even though it's the oppositions, Mars, Saturn, that Saturn in Capricorn,
yeah.
it does make it a little bit easier because Saturn is in its own sign.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So we say, thank you for that.
Yes.
Yeah, but it is interesting. And I do want to just, again, on money, because everyone
Mhm.
focuses a lot on the
Yeah.
second house of income. And certainly that is income and it's money.
Mhm.
It's a lot, for me, I see that more as it's a salary. I'm showing up,
Mhm.
I do my job. That's
Mhm.
security. And right, that's security, which Taurus loves.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And the eighth house is a whole different energy. It's such a very different vibe when it comes to money.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
there is a little bit more of, I think, also risk. Because Scorpio is calculated risks, and that's what I say
Hmm.
to people. It's calculated, but
Hmm.
they will take those kind of a risk. So it's a very different feel with money.
Yeah, and just those, I'm always, I'm definitely obsessed with the the ruler of that house, like where it is, or any of the money houses, right? So like, okay, the ruler of the sixth is connected to the ruler of the eighth, so maybe there's this type of eighth house money coming in through, perhaps, like, it could be something with health and wellness, or it could be something with like your actual day job work, because sometimes your money in your chart it can be partially separate from, say, your day job, because sixth house would be more like gig day job,
Yep.
versus like eighth house could be more like I could receive money from inheritance or something like that. So that's I'm definitely kind of where I'm starting, is looking at all of those houses, the houses that rule them, and how they're all connected. And before that, just like you said, I'm starting with the ruler of the ascendant, because
Of course.
where that's placed, like, it describes sometimes so literally your life circumstances. It sometimes it doesn't have to be that deep. It's like literally your life, like your lived experience, looking at that ruling planet and what it's doing.
To me, it's a snapshot right there of the life. And
Absolutely.
especially if there are a lot of aspects to it,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
can get so much. It's just amazing how much you can get about the person. And sometimes that
Yeah,
actually does it may bring in their money. It may bring in their
exactly.
relationships. The other
Yeah.
thing, we're talking about money.
Hmm.
And I'm also going to mention, because this is connected to money and it's very eighth house,
Hmm.
debt, right? Debt.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's eighth house as
Hmm.
well. And so that's why a lot of people, when they come in with that Taurus Scorpio, and we say it's lessons about money, but sometimes it's also lessons about, really, quite frankly, debt, not going into debt, or using
Hmm.
debt wisely, because sometimes debt can be a good thing, like when, right, we're getting a mortgage, that's good
Right.
debt.
Right. Or give it something like throw Neptune in the eighth house, not seeing things clearly, wearing your rose colored glasses, or even the benefics like Venus and Jupiter, like, supposedly bringing good things, but it can also be just like, it can also be spending too much, frankly, if they're, or something of that nature, right? It doesn't always mean a good thing. However, maybe having that benefic in the eighth house could also mean like there is maybe a way out, essentially, but I've definitely seen like, we're spending, it's fine.
I feel like that Venus or Jupiter, especially in the eighth house, that's why I just feels like, here's my credit card, here's my credit card, here's my credit
Exactly.
card.
Exactly.
But it is a great of fortune, right?
Yeah.
And so I do feel it's very often those they can get their hands on money,
Hmm.
credit when they need it. Well, I need a bigger credit line, or I need to borrow from this credit line to pay that credit line.
Exactly.
Yeah, it will definitely work out, and it can be fortunate,
Yeah.
honestly, for inheritance, for
Hmm.
gifts, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, for inheritance, for gifts. And ideally, everyone wants to think the lottery, but
Right.
could be, win a few
Yeah.
bucks here or there, right, at the races or
Yeah.
something.
Well, so in my chart, if you look at it with whole sign houses, the ruler of my seventh house is in my eighth house. It's like near Jupiter, and I'm like maybe waiting for that to manifest at
Yes.
some point. Maybe there'll be a partner with some financial connections or something. Not that that's important, but that would be nice if it showed up.
It can also be, but I will say this, because partner would be nice, right?
Yeah.
Lifelong. But the role of the seventh and the eighth connected to it could also speak to clients. You can get some clients who
Oh,
are very well connected, or maybe able to sort of really help your star rise. So
absolutely.
that's another way to look at it.
I'll take that too. Because
Absolutely.
Yeah, because eighth house can also be your client's money, correct? Like if we're
Yes.
looking at derivative houses. So I always think that's kind of a fascinating thing to look at too, you know?
Well, that client money, when you look at the charts of entertainers,
Hmm.
athletes, anyone, that type of public, and anyone pretty much self-employed,
Hmm.
it's not that you don't see anything connected to the second house, because of course it's a money house,
Hmm.
but the real wealth flows through that eighth house. And
Hmm.
so that's always, if the eighth house isn't connected, well, then that second house, usually Pluto somehow is connected to it. And,
Right.
I look at it like this: Jupiter is the millionaire of the zodiac.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Big spender, tips
Hmm.
everybody big time. But Pluto is a billionaire
Yep.
of the zodiac.
I think I was just, looking at, there's a birth time for Britney Spears, which I think is correct now. Like,
I think
just,
they corrected it. Yes.
yeah. And, but she has, because remember she has a Jupiter Pluto conjunction. I think it's near her eighth, or like one of them is or excuse me, it's one of them is in her second. And I remember looking at it and like, okay, where's the extreme? And I'm like, oh, there's Pluto. There it is.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
No, right,
anyway.
because that is true. Pluto is a planet of extremes, but that
Hmm.
is when we're talking about money or potential for what I'll call life-changing money.
Hmm.
That is Pluto. And that's why I don't know if you've seen this with your clients, but I've seen this over the time, many years, that now if I'm looking at someone's chart and I am seeing Pluto and looking and say, oh, next year Pluto is going to cross into their sixth house. It's
Hmm.
transforming work. And I cannot begin to tell you how many times I have seen people get laid off at that
Oh,
time.
okay.
Yeah. Or they've made the decision. Sometimes they're retiring, quite frankly, if they're
Hmm.
older, or this is a time that they're saying, I'm going to become self-employed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that changing to that sixth house.
Either way, there's this extreme life change connected to their relationship with work or health too, potentially
Yeah.
there as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I always said, I'd rather have the work than the health, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Because we say,
Exactly.
what do we say? Pluto it breaks things down before it.
Yep.
But I will say this, wherever, and this is the truth with Pluto, and of course it stays in a house for a really long time,
Hmm.
where it is. And I said, once you're old enough, if you look and see where Pluto was when it first went into the house,
Yeah.
and then when you look to see where it ended, because I always say when Pluto started my sixth house years ago, I was a secretary. I was
Oh,
a
wow.
secretary, and I moved up and I was an administrative assistant, but I worked there. And because I use Placidus and I have an intercepted chart, so my
Yeah.
sixth house is very big. So Pluto was like living there very long time.
Yep.
And yeah, really long time. But when it started, I was a secretary. I had like an associate's degree from, a secretarial school.
Hmm.
And just as it was crossing into my seventh house is when I started law school. So, it was a lot
Yeah.
of years, but it was where I started and where I finished. I think I actually was in law school maybe at the time when it crossed in.
Yeah.
And yeah. And so it really is transformative.
Hmm. I haven't had enough time, or like, I'm 33, so
You're young.
Pluto's been in Capricorn for it's since 2008, right? That's how
Yes.
long Pluto's been in Capricorn. Yeah, so maybe I'll have to look and see when it's done, because I'm like, I can either look at it through Placidus, that would be mostly my second house, and then or through whole sign, which is more in my third, and I still quite don't get it. I can see both essentially. But I definitely felt those aspects from Pluto, definitely. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It was 2008. I think, if I recall correctly, I think Pluto was briefly in Capricorn in 2007. It might have dipped its
Okay.
toe in 2007, but it went in then, I believe, in 2008.
Yes.
And, it's just amazing because here it is. And it's getting ready to go into Aquarius.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Of which I remember you pointed out some things to me once about that particular transit that I haven't really heard anyone else talk about. Maybe, like beyond technology and all these things, just because Pluto is so about all these extremes. And I'm like, we'll just have to see.
We just have to see what Pluto has in store,
Exactly.
right? What Pluto has in store for us. But but Pluto is fascinating. And, I will, and I say this, Pluto is the one planet. I'm not, I don't want to say, oh, it strikes fear in my heart. Really, it
Right.
doesn't. But I'm not going to lie that even all the years, and sometimes I think maybe it's too much knowledge is what has to do with it. But when you
Totally.
see those hard Pluto transits, I'm
Mhm.
just finishing up one more pass of Pluto to my moon. There's no exact hit.
Oh, got it.
I can't, and I'm like, oh, and I saw it coming, and I remember thinking, I'm not going to worry about it. Like, I'm not going to
Yeah.
worry about it.
Yeah.
And it was in my sixth house. It was squaring the moon in my sixth house, and I
Mhm.
just kept saying, all right, look, let it be my work. And it did transform my work. I will say
Mhm.
that the moons and six, it did transform a lot of things. And so,
Mhm.
knock wood, so far we've been good with health, but
Okay.
it was but emotional.
Yeah.
There was a time, and I remember thinking to myself, I went through a brief period where I thought like, I think it's, to have like like psychosis or something. It really,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it really is. And that's why, I was able to talk myself off that ledge.
Yeah.
I'm good with my own chart. I have to be honest, fortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, but Pluto can be, but to go back, I just want to just go
Mhm,
back to money
mhm.
for just another,
Absolutely.
yeah, because we love it, right? The money is that for today too, I think a lot of people, because at least this is what I'm seeing. A lot of people, I mean, they're in their jobs or they have their careers, and
Mhm.
there's two big things going on where a lot of people want a lot more freedom from their job. And
Yeah.
even if they weren't working remotely, I know people who've never worked remotely, and they're just like, you know what? I think this is a cool thing. I want to work remotely. I can be home with my kids, let's say,
Mhm.
for example. Others don't want to be stuck in a building. They just want to sort of be out in the field more.
Yeah.
And then I find a lot of people who are coming to retirement age or around retirement age, and quite frankly, realizing that they can't afford to retire.
Mhm, mhm.
And so looking for these other sources of income. So I've had a number of clients along that line to look at the chart to say, well, what is there? What else can I do? So for me, I've really done a lot of research into all these other type of opportunities, because things that I don't always, not honestly, would not normally think of, quite
Yeah.
frankly, like Instacart, shoppers or
Mhm,
right,
mhm.
things like that. In the old days, oh, you could be customer service from home.
Yeah.
And so to look at for those type of things in the chart, and a lot of times it's sort of contract work, even, sort of
Mhm.
part-time contract. And that is where very often you'll see, it was a long way to time for me to get to this point, but that's where you find Uranus,
Okay, gotcha. I was
right?
like, "Where are you going?"
Yeah, where am
I
I going?
gotcha.
I know, my Mercury in Sagittarius was just going on.
I am
But
on for
no,
the
the
ride.
Uranus, but that Uranus influence in the chart very
Mhm,
often.
mhm. That's a really good point. I haven't really thought about that. That's really interesting. Gotta say, I find a lot of the clients who end up finding me, and I would say a lot of the clients end up being your kind of quote ideal client, even though my ideal client is like a broad swath of people, really. But a lot of people who are like starting their own businesses, like one that's like more like aligned with their purpose and all of this stuff. That seems like the biggest question I get. Or like that's like a trend I will end up finding. It's like, people looking for something that fulfills them a little bit more than what they're doing now. I would say a lot more than what they're doing now. But also, it's kind of like, is this the right time, to go into this kind of business, or like, what do you see for money? And like, again, that's when I'm looking at money in the chart. Like, is it connected to that career that we're kind of talking about? And at the same time, I try not to be so rigid that I'm like, oh, I just don't see it, because you don't really know. You don't know everything about it, but
No,
I will just tell them what I'm seeing in the chart of like what this career I'm feeling is, like how that is connected to their money potential, right?
because that's what it comes down to also, is sometimes
Mhm,
people are talented and they have gifts. They may even earn money from it. The chart may not suggest that they can earn, support themselves from it, let's say.
mhm,
But
mhm,
the other point of it is we are looking, because we're always looking at the natal promise,
mhm.
but then transits are going to come and trigger things.
Yes.
So, you never know, sort of lightning strikes at the right moment,
Mhm,
it can
mhm.
work. And I will say that often to clients, if I don't see it, because sometimes you don't, and I'll just say, look, I'm not seeing it. I might be wrong. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean I don't know everything. I don't know everything, and I'm not seeing it,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
usually, to be honest, I found what they're interested in, it's usually you do see it because you attract the right clients. I mean, it's one
Yeah,
thing I've seen.
yeah.
And I think that clients coming, especially clients who come, and it's more about, I'm looking for what my purpose is or what that fulfillment is. It's one of the best, I feel like, uses really of astrology, where it can just be so
Yes.
helpful.
Yeah.
And you also, I just want to mention this because you, of course, you're an astrologer, but
Mhm.
you also incorporate some other disciplines as well.
Mhm.
And you have, I want to bring this up, you have a deep dive,
Yep.
sort of a deep dive reading. And
Yep.
so let's take a moment and tell my listeners about that.
Yeah, so when I was 19, my gateway into this whole world was through numerology, and like I just kind of accidentally stumbled on it through, I don't even really remember how, but I found a really good teacher, like that just really knew her stuff, because I feel like numerology is almost like this lost art at this point. I think it's pretty underrated. because it can be pretty specific as far as your talents, gifts, and abilities, and timing, like looking at predictive things, because this person was like telling me about like certain years I had that were like just describing these really challenging things I went to in childhood. And I was just like, how do you know all this? Like, so I've had a lot of time to do numerology for a long time, but eventually, I got bored with doing that one thing. So that's actually how I started learning some astrology along the way. And I also did psychic development. I did like a year of like, I think I'm intuitive, but I wasn't like seeing like ghosts or anything or having like, all these like experiences. So, and then I found out, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm a psychic medium too. So I've had a long time of doing intuitive readings and then also doing my numerology, and then the past couple of years incorporating astrology. I've kept them all separate for the most part, but with the astrology, it's really easy for me to incorporate some of your numerology into it because the numerology, looking at it alongside the astrology, just it's sometimes it gives me such an easy feel into your energy right away. And I had this girl at this party I was doing, and she was super skeptical of astrology. I saw Pluto on her ascendant, by the way, and I was like, no problem. I totally got this, but I was like, yeah, of course. So you're very skeptical, or like you're just, you kind of have this BS detector thing going on. So, but she was like, well, I have a twin, so I don't, and we're really different, and I don't understand how astrology could be accurate. And I was like, well, I could probably look at your astrology and tell you some things, but it would be easier for me to look at your numerology and tell you how you're different, basically, because her numerology chart was like, it gave me project manager, boss, executive, lady energy. Hold on, that's my cat. He's crying. Give me 1 second.
Go right ahead. Take care of your cat.
Neediest kitty ever. I swear to God. Okay. So,
like kids, it's like kids.
I know. I was like, I haven't seen you for 30 seconds. I'm gonna lose my mind. So, and then his chart had a very different feel to it, and it was just through the numerology and of their name that I could. Oh, hi, kitty! Come on, jump up here. Let's say hi to the camera. All right. So, through this deep dive package that I had, because people would ask me all the time, they're like, people who kind of want to do everything and like know everything, they're like, what should I do? What should I start with? Like, and I've always just been like, I have no idea. Like, what do you want to do? It just depends. The intuitive reading can sometimes be really strikingly specific, because it's like, I see you in a nurse's uniform and blah, 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 like when they're asking about career, right? But I also might get similar information through their astrology chart. It just comes out in a different way. So I was like, I just kind of felt pulled to I felt like my guides were like, Alex, you really just need to start combining this stuff for people who want to do it. So that's when I was just like, I think I just need to do like a deep dive package. So essentially we would do all three with this package. So we'll start with I'm going to start with the numerology, just kind of give you a background as far as your numerology chart. So talents, gifts, and abilities, kind of where you're going in this lifetime, the different kind of chapters of life that can come up with numerology. The second session, and I do them separately, we would dive into your natal chart. So we would do this deep dive where, which I have to say, the approach, because of course I went through your certification program, of starting with the first house, going all the way around the wheel is so.
Who taught you that?
I know. I was like, I wonder who taught me that. I gotta say, I think it has a lot of depth, and I've always really liked it, just because there's a lot of sun, moon, rising readings out there, and I'm like, I don't do that. So giving you all the detail from your astrology chart. And then the third session would be an intuitive reading. So I would actually go into your Akashic records, and I just kind of listen straight to what your spirit guides have to say. And any questions that have come up from these two readings, it's kind of like, well, why was I born with the Saturn Mars thing? It's like, well, your Akashic records, it's kind of like, the records of your soul, they might have more information on that, essentially. So I haven't done a lot of these so far, but it's nice I definitely crave like depth, and I like going into depth with people instead of just doing like little quick readings have their place, and I like those too. I think my Gemini placements like that a lot.
Right.
But it's nice to really kind of get to the core of it essentially with people, because it can just, again, I mean, even with just the astrology, it can reveal so much, even just from looking at that chart ruler, like, just describing these life challenges and events and all of this stuff. So, yeah. And then if anyone's interested in booking that, you just go on my website or, and just, there should be a link to either contact me or schedule. So.
And just that is dogstarOracle.com.
Yeah.
I want to mention about the numerology because that also goes with cycles. Just because with the astrology and you're looking ahead and there are cycles, and sometimes they really do line up well.
Yeah.
And I think what happened with, I'm going to say with numerology,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's sort of like your sun sign astrology, or it's just, okay,
Yeah.
the big three, the sun, moon, and ascendant. And believe me, I'm not knocking the sun, moon, or ascendant by any means, but it never cut it for me, right? And so and not everyone, not everyone needs a deep dive reading, and not everyone needs an in-depth reading, but I do find this very meaningful. And it's, again, what we prefer to do. But with the numerology, and I think sort of what happened is what I will call popular numerology, there's years 1 through 9, right? And that's it. But there is so much more with the pinnacles and where you are. So to have someone who's really knowledgeable, again, it's beyond that 1 through 9. But even with 1 through 9, I sat down one day and I just made a whole list, like 1 year and all the 1 years, all the 2 years.
Yeah.
And I saw, for some, I didn't see much of a pattern, to be honest. My 9 years, I certainly saw a pattern. My 4 and 5 years, I had very distinct patterns in my 4 and 5 years.
Yeah.
And so, and then when they came up the next round, it was like, I was okay. I knew what I wanted to sort of maximize. And I also knew where I had some issues. And so it was an easier year. It wasn't a walk in the park, but it was a much easier year, just being aware of certain things. And so I do think the astrology and the numerology can blend very well together.
Yeah. And, and I of course, I'm like, I want to look at your chart now. I'm like, I wonder where 4 and 5 is in your name. Like, do you have any challenges to those numbers? Because if you have a challenge going on in that chart, that personal year number is probably going to be a little bit more difficult, or just a little bit more, and then of course you have like the letters of your name influencing that year too. Yeah,
influencing you by what letter is active right at that time during a certain year. And that's why I just say it's really numerology. It's not 1 through 9. It really isn't.
It's always the weirdest thing to explain to people when I'm doing the reading. I'm like, okay, the L is active. I'm not going to go too much into why, but here's what's going on with it, essentially, because it can just sound so wonky.
No, that's why it's like when I talk about progressions, if I'm doing a reading and I'm noticing, and there's some progressions, and, and I'll say to the client, because I don't want to think I'm just pulling this out of the air. This is not, and also this is not an intuitive reading. That's something separate. Exactly. But I'll just say, there's, it's an advanced technique. It's called progressions. Please just trust me on this. And because it gets the technical, and they're not there for the technical. They're not here for my reading. Right. They're not here for me to teach them astrology.
Exactly. Unless you get that one once in a while that like really kind of, I'm like, oh, I'll give you the full behind here's my giant whiteboard of like insane, information. So I might take a little bit of time, but usually I'm like, let's cut to the chase a little bit.
What I find, honestly, is because I will get a lot of clients, and really what they know their sun sign. That's what they know, and that's all they know. So those are the ones, and I'll say, this technique, trust me on this.
Yeah.
And I've always attracted a lot of clients who, when they get on the phone, a lot of them speak astrology.
Yeah.
I have a lot of clients that they may not be astrologers. Some are, some aren't, but even those who aren't, a lot of them, I'm like, they've got the knowledge, they know, because they'll say to me, but what about, I want to know about these aspects that are coming, these transits that are coming up.
Like, wow.
So,
cool. It's like you've done your homework. Oh my God.
Yeah. So, and in some ways that's very refreshing, because I can just, go right at it, and I don't have to sort of think the way I'm phrasing it. It's like, okay, this is trying
to give the long introduction. I'm like, okay, here we go. So
let's just jump into it. Yeah. And so you also, I want to talk about your podcast. Okay. So you have your podcast, which is called To the Stars.
Yep.
Okay. And It is available, well, wherever you can hear a podcast. I'm sure it's right.
Exactly.
It's available. Thank God they're all over. So
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the podcast, just just anything you want to share about it.
Yeah. I'm definitely, so I've had various kind of interviews with people, psychic mediums, astrologers, numerologists, all that kind of, anyone I find interesting,
Mhm.
essentially, that I think will have a good conversation that will, so I've had a lot of really good interviews with people, but I've also will sometimes just talk about the energy of the moment and, kind of giving like a little, astrology kind of forecast or something like that. So that's probably what I'll be focusing on going into the future, are just like big monthly kind of by sign horoscopes, because frankly those were the ones that I kind of grew up on a little bit. You know what I mean? I'm like, I gotta go listen, like, and that's kind of how I learned astrology too, and how I understood that when someone is doing a horoscope, they're looking at the rising sign. And because if anyone listens to a horoscope, I'm always just like, listen to your rising sign, maybe your sun sign if it's
Yeah,
applicable. But looking at the rising sign kind of taught me astrology a little bit, because of how they were kind of pulling this information. I'm like, oh, blah 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 is going to be in your seventh house. I'm like, what is that? So that's kind of actually what taught me initially, was kind of reverse engineering popular horoscopes that I really liked. And that's probably going to be focusing on going forward, are just, horoscopes for your sign, with the occasional interview with someone super cool that's doing something in the spiritual realm, essentially. And that again, it's on iTunes, YouTube, Google. Basically, just type it in anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's video or audio. So.
and you do a lot of updates also about the astrological weather, we'll call it, on
Yep.
TikTok.
Yep. Yep. I do more of those definitely on TikTok, just because they're, little, 1 to 3 minute little sound bites, especially because, TikTok is full of treasure. It's also full of just like, what are you even saying? I saw a really popular video that was saying like, this new moon in Gemini is the most lucky of the year. It's a new moon Kazemi. The new moon is conjunct the sun. And I was like, that is every new moon, babe. So I was just like, I held back on like, sharing it and being like, what is this about? I just let it go. But it's nice to share, I guess actual
Legitimate
astrology.
astrology.
Yeah.
No.
Exactly.
No,
So
there's, I call it junk astrology. You know that. I
yes.
do that. There's a
Yes.
lot of junk astrology out there, and there's a lot of good astrologers out there. There's a lot of up and coming,
Yes.
good astrologists.
A
But
lot.
every now and then you hear things, and I hear things, and I'm just like, okay, you're just making that up.
I know. I was like, I don't know, understand anything you're saying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it's not
yeah,
even like it's a pretense of I'm channeling this from someone. No, it's
exactly.
just, yeah.
It is literally just random words that you were saying.
It's cringeworthy. It's sort of
And
like it's like when somebody calls me an astrologist, it's like I
yes,
cringe. It's like,
totally.
no, I'm an astrologer.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
Yes.
but you do a lot, and I know it's quick, but you get to the point. So influences that are coming up, and that I will just say to anyone,
Mhm,
if you're
mhm,
interested on keeping up on what's coming up with aspects are going on,
mhm,
by all means, follow Alex on TikTok, because
mhm.
you're really good with keeping up with that stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, it's also just fun. It doesn't take me long. I'm like, let's just chat for a minute about, this Venus Uranus aspect, or, like anything that's happening in the sky. That way I can just log on and just quickly talk about it. So
Yeah. No, but absolutely. And so
mhm,
I just want to I know I've given it already, but for those who are just listening
mhm.
on, excuse me, on YouTube, right below, you can go, you'll see all of the links. I've got them right down there. But Instagram, TikTok, it's Dogstar Oracle, and it's
Yes.
dogstaroracle.com is
Mhm.
the website. And it's To the Stars podcast.
Yeah,
And
it's
I'm
To the Stars with Alexander Creek, and then you can find
sorry
it.
about, yes, To
Yeah.
the Stars with Alexander Creek.
Mhm,
Okay. And there's something that I'm missing. So I'm looking at my notes because I feel like
mhm,
there's one other. Oh, YouTube, duh,
mhm,
YouTube. And
mhm.
so you can also find Alex right here on YouTube at Alexander Creek. And
Awesome.
that's,
I
and
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was going to say, and it's Kriech, because I used to
Yes.
misspell that. So that's why I'm just being very mindful of that,
Totally.
Alex.
Yeah, it is compulsory if you like to invert the E and the I in that
Yeah.
name, like, yeah, with everybody. So yeah,
Yeah.
you are good.
No, but it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today. And again, great to speak with you. And so for everyone, I'm going to tell you, check out Alex's website, look into his deep dive reading. He also has his astrology readings, your numerology readings, your intuitive readings.
Mhm.
Numerology, you are blending with the astrology, correct? As
Yeah. Yep.
needed?
Yes. So for the moment, you can't book a standalone
That's
numerology
right.
reading.
As I
Mhm.
said it, I thought, no, I think there was a
Yeah.
shift there, right? The
Yeah.
numerology you incorporate into the astrology, right? As
Yes.
appropriate. And
Yep.
the intuitive readings, though, you can do a standalone intuitive
Yep.
reading if you're interested in that. But if you go
Definitely.
for the deep dive, you get everything.
Exactly. Yeah, that way I can spend as much time as I want. I'm like, okay, that way my brain can just really kind of go nuts on
And it
this.
is, just to remind everyone, it is divided into 3 sessions, so it's not going to be like this crazy overload of time. You
Yes,
have time
totally.
you have time to digest it,
Yes,
right
absolutely.
in between.
Yep, and
And
it's all recorded for you too, because I know I've gotten readings in the past, and I'm so lucky I've had the recording, because sometimes I'm so just like deer in the headlights, like, oh my God, they're like reading me my whole life, and I'm like absorbing 50% of what you're saying. So recording it is always something I like to do for everyone. Like,
no,
yeah,
I agree. And that's why I've always recorded my readings. It's so much information. That's part of it, is that there's so
yeah,
much, and if you're trying to take that many notes, you're not
mhm,
really present,
yeah,
right? You're
totally.
so busy listening, but you're not really in getting the moment, or maybe thinking of questions to ask. So
Mhm,
yeah, so recording is included. That is
mhm,
wonderful. And
mhm.
again, it's just so great to sit here and chat with you about one of
Same.
your favorite topics, but quite frankly, it's one of everybody's most interesting
Yeah,
topics.
yeah, totally.
And all. So again, Alexander Creek, dogstaroracle.com. Check them out. And I am Debra Ann Clement, and I will be back here hopefully in the next week. And until then, may Jupiter's blessings be your constant companion.